Kevin Lee. How are you, Kevin?
Great. Thanks for inviting me.
Good to hear. Just some quick background on Kevin. Professor Lee is a multidimensional legal scholar and teacher with advanced degrees in Christian ethics, religious studies, philosophy, and religion. Kevin is an associate professor at the Campbell University School of Law. Kevin, it's intriguing that you're truly a Renaissance man. If I had to characterize you, we live in an era where it almost seems like most academics nowadays are so siloed, right? And you really seem to branch. You hit on Christian ethics to philosophy of law to technology. I mean, you really run the gamut there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let me first say that you would find probably a good number of people, including some of my colleagues, who would say you can't be a Renaissance man today.
Right.
I'm struggling. I'm fighting upstream like the salmon returning home to spawn or something. But yeah, I mean, I had an interesting background. I think when I was studying ethics, I was captivated by the idea that so much of our social thought and it depends on our self-understanding as human beings. Like, what are we, what they would call philosophical anthropology. And so, and it informs the political theory and the legal theory.
Right.
I studied John Paul II as in my program, and he lived through the communist era in Poland and the fascist era before that, and which isn't unlike my own father, who was Korean, who also was raised in occupied Korea under the Japanese rule, and then overrun by the North Koreans, and so he knew both fascism and communism too. And John Paul II said that the problem with those totalitarian regimes ultimately was they didn't understand the nature of the person. And so they had a misconstrued nature of the person. They didn't understand what freedom is and what, how to liberate people.
Wow.
And that's how I got started. How I got to technology, so it was another issue. It's sort of from the same thing. I became aware, there's a great philosopher at Oxford today. His name's Luciano Floridi, and he studies information philosophy, or the philosophy of information. He wrote a nice little book called The Fourth Revolution, and his point was one that really it struck me, because he said the first revolution was Copernicus decentering the Earth from the center of the universe, and human beings being decentered by that. And then the second one is Darwin decentering us as a species of one among many. And then Freud, for him, decenters our notion of reason, that we're not always rational and even about ourselves.
Interesting. Right.
And then we're in the Fourth Revolution, inspired by Alan Turing and Claude Shannon. Turing, who proved to us that human beings are not the only things that do computation, and Shannon, who shows us that information is a ubiquitous natural phenomenon.
Right.
And so taking that seriously with John Paul II's idea, what does that do to our politics and our understanding of law? Right? And it's really interesting to me because it'd be hard to find any substantial or useful bit of legal knowledge that isn't taken up into some sort of data, digital data. And I don't think we really quite have come to terms with the significance of that. So it's a good time for legal philosophers to be thinking about what does it mean. There's the idea that you have to convert it back to sort of semantic information to use it. That's good.
Right.
The thing is, I'm not sure that that's what happens when humans interact with it.
Right.
But human interaction with the law is only a part of the picture now. Machine-to-machine interactions with law happen all the time and will, I think, in the future accelerate.
Interesting.
So what does it mean when you're doing some kind of predictive analytics and then convert it back and tag the information, but just use it as data and search through the law, ask big data.
Right.
How is that going to change the nature of it? And I think to get to that question, you have to start with, hey, the law is information, just like everything else, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, so it's a different kind of, and it has a lot of implications.
Definitely.
For different areas of law.
Sure
You think
does.
a corporation as an information
Right.
system, privacy is a critical one.
Definitely. Cool.
So, yeah, it's been fascinating, and it took me into just sort of trying to go out and meet as many people in different contexts who are doing different things to see what's going on.
Right.
Out there in the greater world beyond the academy.
Definitely. Exactly. That's cool.
Yeah, no, it's been, I have to say, it's been really, so we started a legal hackers group.
Right, I saw that.
In Raleigh, and I found out quickly that one of the Campbell alums, named Tom Brook, is in Charlotte. He had started a legal hackers group there.
Cool.
Tom's, he's a, really good, he left practice, well, he hasn't left practice, but he began programming about 15 years ago, I guess.
Nice.
And so he worked on the original, Clio law practice management. He was one of the people who worked on that. And he knows everyone. So we recently, started working really closely together this past year with plans of incorporating and trying to do some pretty interesting things here.
It's really cool.
We got interested in blockchain.
Right.
And so we're trying to do we see in the Bar Association has been extremely supportive.
That's good.
Very generous.
That's really good.
We're looking to do things like trying to bring blockchain to state,
Right.
the state government. That would be a great project.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So what would that look like? I know, so blockchain is really interesting technology, specifically because it's a smart contract, not because it's money per se, but money is a part of it, right? Because
money is one application.
exactly, but it's not the only application of blockchain.
Right. I think one of the exciting, to demonstrate the potential, you can put pretty much, it's like an operating system. So you can put
Right.
anything on to run on it. And I've heard about attempts to distribute music that way.
Wow.
Which I think is a really cool idea. Right?
Definitely.
The user would get a key, and you'd know who had the key and where it was.
Right. Where it is.
And again, every transaction is recorded
Exactly.
too, which is kind of an interesting feature. In the law, there's different uses. One of the common examples is as a property registry.
Interesting.
You can automate that whole title
Right.
registry thing, and or for example, even something simple, because it can't be changed.
Right.
If you need an authoritative source, you can put it out in blockchain, and that can be the authoritative source. So like the state
Interesting.
could say, every law that we write, the authoritative source is going out here in blockchain.
Wow.
Yeah, that's so. I think there's all sorts of. There's in Nevada, there's a program called Silverflume, which is the way they register LLCs.
Right.
And that's all done with blockchain. It's one of the first test projects. Something like that would be nice to do.
Wow.
So all sorts of potential. I think there's some potential in the future to see, hopefully even Campbell students learning to do this.
Wow.
And being able to have students graduate with a law degree who can actually write smart contracts or do some analytics.
Right.
I think that's the future for not for for some areas, right? I think
Right.
that will be a part of the future for lawyers.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's a cool future too.
It really is. It really is.
And then, like I say, that's sort of the blockchain side. On the artificial intelligence side, wow.
Wow, right.
I think there will soon be, from what I understand, a platform where you could just ask it a question in natural language and it'll answer it with a brief.
Jeez.
Yeah, and within minutes, right?
Cool.
So I used to do that for a living.
Right,
That was
exactly.
mainly my practice. Then you see things like there are now companies that they'll do predictive analytics on a case to give it a value, so they can value
Right.
the case, and then they will fund the litigation. So, you have a litigation like a big class action, you can't afford
Right.
it. One of my favorite law movies, right? John Travolta, is that movie called A Civil Action, and it's a true story about how, it's a big tort action, mass
Right.
tort, and he essentially bankrupts his firm trying to, finance that suit. Well, these companies will come in and finance the suit, but they have a pretty good idea of what the value will be.
Right.
And so they want their cut up front, or,
Wow.
they'll make you agree ex ante for the cut.
Interesting.
So, yeah, I think that's going to be interesting.
Definitely.
I'm not sure I like it. Sort of commoditizing the lawsuit, treating it almost like it was a security investment.
Right. We've heard about that, especially with Hulk Hogan and Gawker, Peter Thiel sponsoring it. Well, a lot of people cried foul that the rich were influencing the legal system, but above that, there's this whole industry of sponsoring lawsuits like it's an investment.
It's been around for a long time, and so it's established. What's new is the ability to, quantize predicted value, right? So it's going to be, this case will be worth $50,000 plus or minus, so much with a certain percent of accuracy cover and the whole thing, which then you can actually package together as almost like a security, right?
Right.
It's like, why, if you know that, why not have like derivatives, right?
Right, exactly.
Which is packages of, and that sounds a lot like the way the financial crisis.
Exactly. It did, right? Wow.
Another legal lawsuit bubble, right?
Right.
But I don't think that would actually happen. But I wonder what it'll do. Certainly, there's some benefit, right? It increases access to justice because there'll be, people, you could set up a fund to help people who can't afford litigation if they're injured. That would be a good use. But the power between the company that knows the value of the case and the injured party who doesn't, like that disparity in power it concerns me.
It's a problem.
We want to make sure the rules account for that. Maybe a disclosure requirement.
Right.
But that's the way of the world. I imagine if you can develop that, there's probably a hedge fund that would love to buy it.
Exactly. Especially nowadays.
Well, imagine if the case, if it's me having a tort action or something, that's one thing. But imagine if it's an IP case after, and it's going to move the stock. And that's, how much is that worth, right?
Exactly.
How much money do you have, right?
That's right. That's exactly right.
So these are some of the things that I think they're going to change the nature of what we do dramatically.
Right.
And, add in, the Internet of Things and the amount of data that will suddenly be available about everything I do in the day.
Exactly.
It's kind of frightening too. So, yeah. It's a good time to be a law professor, I guess, from that
That's
perspective.
right.
There's plenty of things to work on.
That's good. Lots to think about.
Like, probably not, I don't know what happens 20 years from now for the students, frankly. But
Right.
the only thing I always tell them is, it's going to be different than it is now.
That's right.
So
That's
one
right.
thing you can count on. Right?
That's right.
Change is coming. So,
That's interesting. So you mentioned, 20 years from now, like what is it going to look like for a law student, right? So the legal market. It seems, I have friends that went and got a JD, and a lot of them, they've gone into business and have been very successful. Like just not necessarily going into a law practice is not the only path. And I think if you understand that, and you go out and you learn analytics, or you go out and
that's
keep it over the line.
We've had a couple of students, and hopefully more on the way, who've been doing analytics programs after graduation, and
I bet it's
the amount of money that's
We
been
need to
thrown
get into
at
that.
them. And it's like, not necessarily practicing, but to understand the law enough so that you can look at analytics about it and understand what the significance is. Right? And then that's McKinsey and those huge firms that need that kind of thing.
That's
so
right.
Good money. And not too many people can have that combination.
That's right.
I talked from time to time, especially, I've tried to help students get into that.
Right.
To talk to the people who run those programs, and they're like, a law school's calling? Why is a law school calling us? They don't even,
Right.
it's not even on their
Like,
radar
it
yet.
doesn't register.
But when they put them into the job market.
That's right. That's very interesting.
Yeah. And we here in Raleigh have amazing educational programs all around
Right.
us, which is one of the blessings of being here.
Definitely. We sure do. And funny enough, that you mentioned analytics and law. So Eric, our chief scientist right over here to our left, he went through an analytics program at NC State. And
Yeah.
what we've done here recently in the past 2 weeks is we've got the entire body of case law, and we're mapping that with machine learning. And we're seeing we're still exploring, what does that look like? What does that solution look like? Is there a solution there? But we're going through that and just seeing what that's like, and it's some really interesting results.
Yeah, I bet. That's fascinating, and that's like the future. I mean, that's going to. But again, it goes right to what I'm saying. There is, in law, in sort of standard legal scholarship now.
Right.
There's a lot of analytics going on.
Interesting.
There's a Supreme Court database, right? You may have run into this. But what is it? They've taken, I think, every case, and they've tagged the cases with 60 different flags. And you can do all sorts of linear regression on it.
Wow.
Oh, that's cool.
That's really cool.
And there's some interesting things that come out of that. But it's also it's limited by the assumptions that are built into tags.
Right.
Right? And it's limited by, the kind of statistical analysis that you can do. I mean, linear regression is okay for some things, right?
Right.
And it has a lot of bias built in, because one of the tags is whether the judge, how conservative or liberal is the judge? Well, that's really subjective.
It really is.
And so I think the future is like this, getting the data as data.
Right.
And as raw data, and figuring out how to, and machine learning is probably the way you have to go to do that. So, it's going to be really interesting. Yeah, and it's a growing field. It's just, there's so many people doing things in this space right now.
It sure is.
I'm convinced it'll take us about maybe 1,000 years to figure it all out.
We'll get there eventually.
We'll get there eventually.
That's the hopeful part to the asterisk.
Yeah, but that's really cool. I'll be interesting to see what you guys have come up with.
I'm sure.
What kind of applications? There's lots of different kinds of applications out there. I think. I know that the big thing now is Ross Industries.
Right.
They're doing some really great work on analyzing the law, and actually the other part is producing the brief at the end.
Definitely.
That's the other difficult part. But, seeing computers write narrative we already have it.
It's eerie.
Right? Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
It sure is. It sure is.
You're in town too.
Right.
Your company's right here. So yeah,
Definitely.
yeah.
Cool. So I want to go back a little bit actually, and learn a little bit about your view around what is the state of, kind of, for lack of a better term, what's the state of nature for humans? And that can be, we're not in a state of nature, so this could be bad. But we've got Hobbes, we've got Rousseau. What is this?
What is this doing to us?
And, right, and what does that do to us in these current systems we live in?
Well, there's a philosopher named Nicholas Luhmann.
Interesting. No way. Wait. You're the first American that I've ever met that knows who Nicholas Luhmann is. Well, I might be saying it wrong, but a German professor introduced me.
Yeah.
To it,
But
wow.
What's he say? Right. He says humans don't communicate. Communication communicates.
Right. Exactly.
Which is a kind of odd way, I think, of saying, the system has its own dynamic.
Exactly.
And what are we in that dynamic? We're inputs.
Right.
Right, which have some ability to shape the system, but not all of it, right? So that
Definitely.
the system has its own agenda in some ways. And I think you see that certainly the larger you go, right?
Right.
And the more complex the system, you can see that more and more. I don't know, at the international level, it's hard to say that any particular input can move that system, like an international trade system.
Right.
I may send, you know, I buy a lot of things on Amazon. Some of them come from abroad.
Right.
My inputs have no bearing at all on the law, right?
Exactly.
And even as it grows, it's not going to, you know, no one person's going to have enough agency to
Right.
shape that much. The other good example would be like in the securities industry.
Right.
Right. That's so technical. It's changing. There's a real systems dynamic to what's going on there between the market and the regulation.
Right.
And they affect each other. But we kind of feel, I kind of feel like we're losing control of the system. It has its own, and I think as it gets more complex,
Right.
We need artificial intelligence more and more to cope with the complexity of the law.
Right.
Some of my colleagues say they would never use an artificial intelligence system in their legal practice.
Right.
I think, what are you doing with Google? I mean, you know, or any of the commercial, you know, services. Of course, there's layers and layers of machine learning involved
Exactly.
in that, and they're using it and they don't even realize
That's
it.
right.
You know, and it's already there. And I think as the system grows more complex, we'll need that more and more. We need to be able effectively to expand our cognitive capacity to, you know,
Right.
to cope with
To
this
manage
growing
it, right.
complexity. But that means we lose agency too.
That's right.
We have less control of it. In the end, we end up being maybe like little grits of sand in the gears of one of those sort of
Right.
early
Just
20th.
like
I think of Charlie Chaplin, Modern
Right,
Times,
exactly.
getting stuck in the that's a pessimistic view, but I mean, more optimistically, you know, look at what it's achieving, right?
Right.
We do have a much more complex society, and what are the benefits of that? More efficient use of resources, you know, greater wealth, you know, hopefully energy efficiency in the long run,
Right.
and a cleaner environment. So I mean, there are these great tangible benefits that we can have, but maybe the cost of that is individual agency is sort of more limited to local decisions. You know, you
Right.
think about these discussions, you hear about them all the time about self-driving cars,
Right.
and how they have to be optimized. Who are they going to kill in
Oh,
the
they're gonna
accident?
kill,
and all
exactly.
that
It's
sort of
like-
thing. I mean, do I really want that decision? I don't know.
Exactly.
Am I giving up something I really
That's
want?
right.
I mean, you know, it happens. So it adds a layer of control,
Definitely.
and it'll have moral meaning of what that control is. I always think, who's going to get sued? Like, the car is optimized to kill that, you know, the
That's
one
right.
person to save the five. Do the heirs of that one person get to sue the manufacturer of
Exactly.
the car? Whoever
Right,
wrote the
right.
program? I mean, who's going to?
Right.
Somebody's going to. You know, the suit's coming. I can tell you
It
that.
is. Exactly. It's interesting.
Yeah, that's I think where some work needs to be. I think it worked out.
Definitely.
They're coming. I have a daughter who's in Pittsburgh now, and she.
Oh
tells
boy,
me-
Uber just
Yeah,
just up
they're
driving Volvos
around.
out there.
Yeah,
That's right.
driving around. I guess somebody in the passenger seat.
I think
or
they have
driver.
something
Probably
like
with
that.
a brake.
Exactly. Hopefully so.
Well, I imagine like the city probably wanted
I'm
that,
sure,
nothing else.
I'm sure.
You can put them out there, but I want someone there with a brake.
Exactly.
Like a driver in training.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Which it literally
It
is. I mean,
it really is.
You know, but what is that? 5 years old, maybe.
That's right.
Before, maybe less. I know there was a Ford CEO was interviewed on CNBC, and he said their fleet's going to be ready in 5 years. So
Wow.
yeah, and then and the interviewer asked him if that was soon enough. Right. So,
Right.
Yeah. So it may be a lot sooner. So yeah, I think I always tell my students I don't think this is the time to be thinking about a long career in motor vehicle law.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so.
Yeah.
I would
Yeah, a few
hedge my
years
bets
in
on
there,
that
but
one. That's right.
or it'll look like nothing that
Exactly.
because it will be figuring out like who to sue in those complex things. I don't know, traffic violations
Right.
will go away, which would probably be a good thing for some of us.
Exactly.
I'm looking forward to riding to work.
Right. Get a paper done on the way.
Exactly.
That's right.
Take another 20-minute nap or something.
Really though. Really though. So yeah, cool. So in the next part, we kind of go into overrated or underrated. So I'm gonna throw
Oh yeah,
it
let's
out.
try this. Okay.
And,
I may
overrated.
not know everything you're gonna throw at me, but
That's
go
right,
ahead.
That's right. I'm gonna try. So the first one I've got is economic growth. Is economic growth underrated right now or overrated right now?
I'm gonna say it's overrated.
Interesting.
The reason is, I think that a totalizing drive to economic growth really just makes us actually feel like we're the grit in the machine even
Right.
more. Right? That other values need to be expressed, that should
Right.
be expressed. What we wouldn't want to become is simply economic agents.
Right.
So the farther we move from being simply economic agents, there's an economic cost to it.
That's right.
Right? So what space do we leave? That's probably a good thing for the law to consider, for legislature
Definitely.
to consider. But I would be concerned that, we lose so much of our humanity by being
Right.
overtaken. Then, I always say this, that it's what I've learned about human nature. To think of like Kurzweil and his whole idea of the singularity.
Right.
If somebody was going to build me, they never would, because I'm such a flawed product.
Right.
Right? So and it's in the way we handle our own deficiencies and flaws that
Right.
is a lot of what makes us distinctly human.
Definitely.
And the sort of nobility of being human is like, I have to cope with this handicap or that handicap. And a totalizing drive for economic growth. Imagine what that's like in an age, that coming age, when we have control over our biology.
Right.
Right? So that anyone who's different in a way that makes them less economically efficient can
Yes.
be, abolished. And we've had that experience.
That's
was
right.
The eugenics movement
That's exactly
in
right.
the early 20th century. So, a little
Something to
skeptical.
think about.
Yeah.
Something to think about.
Like, it's not that economic growth is a bad thing. It's certainly a very
Right.
good thing. But it shouldn't be the only end that's considered.
Right. Definitely. It's so interesting, right? Because I think we've seen in the past, I don't know, probably since the 70s, 50s, 70s, since the 70s, economic growth and wages has kind of, they've stagnated, right? And it seems like we're really feeling it right now. It's, most millennials believe they're going to have lower living standards than their parents,
Mhm.
which seems kind of concerning just because, in America, we have one of the highest GDPs. We have, one of the richest countries. We are the richest country in the world. And we have these high living standards, but what about everybody else too, right? And so what does that mean? I don't know, it's just something that,
Yeah, there's several factors there. And it's not, if it was stagnant, that would be bad. It's actually declining.
Exactly,
It's a lot
exactly.
worse,
That's right. It's like even worse.
So, and I think, part of it is the fact that, as Thomas Friedman said, the world is flat.
That's right.
If you're an accountant today practicing accounting here in North Carolina, you're competing with people all
Everybody.
around the world, right?
That's right.
Because there's nothing that's more portable than numbers, and that's what accountants do, right?
That's right.
So those kinds of forces are at work, and that lowers the standard of living. But I think also technology, the automation, I think what it's done to the legal industry 10 years ago, and certainly when I was first out of law school, I remember those days when you'd wade through boxes and boxes of documents, and there were a lot of young new hires who, doing discovery work, looking for the
Right.
key documents, and that's all automated now.
Exactly.
Right? And so the big firms don't hire as many, first-year associates. They don't need them. There's other economic changes too. So that's driving, part of the change too is that the technology is taking jobs away.
Right.
And it's making work done that used to be sort of a skilled labor work for the white-collar worker is now being devalued by the fact that it is increasingly automated. So it doesn't eliminate the lawyer, but it makes the lawyer much more efficient.
Right.
Well, if the lawyers are more efficient, that means we can have fewer of them, and the ones who are out there have to work at lower wages. That's the way things are going to go for the time being. In itself, that's probably it's going to you really do feel it. It's going to drive a lot of political change probably, but I think the real problem is the way that works in the economy is that return on investment and is
Right.
greater than the expansion of the economy. So the people who are able to have the capital to invest are wealthy and
Capital.
you know, but there's a sort of a tech solution to that that's coming.
Yeah.
And that's crowdfunding.
Right.
Right? Because, you know, to buy shares in a startup, you usually have to be an accredited investor.
Right. You need to
$250,000 a year in income or $1 million of liquid
Right.
capital. And crowdfunding lets just, you know, average folks buy shares and,
do it.
and you know, what I imagine will happen is that people will figure out how to pool crowdfunded shares so
Right.
that you can have portfolios and hopefully participate in, you know, the next Uber.
Exactly.
Which is the sort of democratization. That's one way to help redistribute the wealth in a way that also encourages capital growth.
Right.
And I mean, honestly, I can't imagine that there won't be, just from a, you know, practical sense, common sense political consequences of it, that
Right.
we're going to see taxes go up.
Right.
It's going to happen. It's sort of a natural consequence. Otherwise, we'll have such a disparity that the people, the have-nots, will no longer take it.
Right.
Anymore. And then you have the pitchforks in the street.
Exactly. Exactly. That's right.
We don't want that. So, at some point, though, you know, it's in everyone's interest.
Exactly.
And you know, if you read like Stiglitz, if there was a more robust middle class, the economy would grow faster.
Right.
So everyone would benefit from that too.
Definitely.
But yeah, it's going to be some pain ahead to
Right.
adjust to all of these things.
Sure will. Exactly. Yeah. Have you ever read the economist Tyler Cowen before?
Yeah.
By any chance? Okay, so I got to meet Tyler Cowen.
Oh, did you?
I did. He's a very interesting guy. I had coffee with him, but so his theory. I don't know. Have you read The Great Stagnation? Averages.
Yes. Yeah. A while ago. Yeah.
Right. Just the idea that the middle class is basically going to disappear.
Yeah.
The 1% is going to turn into about the 10%.
Yeah.
The lower 90% are, you know, they're going to be worse off. Everything's going to be cheaper.
Yeah.
So you know, it's kind of like this straight up. It's kind of like the hipster millennials today
Yeah.
who, you know, they don't make a lot of money, but they eat at really nice restaurants and live in, like, you know,
Right.
these tiny San Francisco apartments and have cars, right?
Yeah.
I don't. But
What do you think about you know, having a guaranteed minimum income? I mean, this seems
I've
to be
definitely
something
kicked that
that's
around.
possible. It's hard for me to imagine, honestly,
Right.
and I don't talk about social engineering on a massive scale.
Right, exactly,
Like, what will that
exactly.
do to us? I
That's
don't
right.
really know. Yeah, that's frightening.
Definitely, sure is. Cool. So the next one I have is overrated or underrated is John Rawls.
Yeah, Rawls. Yeah, and because I know some German philosophy, I prefer Habermas to Rawls, so I'm going to say
Nice.
he's overrated.
There you go. All right.
One of the things about you know, Rawls's work is very relevant to what we were just saying. He does
Right.
not have a concept of envy.
Exactly.
I think he needs one. You know,
Right.
honestly, because I think that the disparity gets to a point where envy does play a role in political stability, and that's not part of Rawls's theory, actually. So yeah, I mean, Rawls is an important thinker, and
Right.
he certainly had a huge impact in American society,
Sure has.
as Habermas has in Europe. And I don't see the relevancy of Rawlsian philosophy diminishing. I just think that in the context we're going into, you know, in his second book, to illustrate it, you know, political liberalism, he has to come to terms with the fact that his first book presumed a sort of a type of society, right? And as the world shrinks, I think the diversity aspect is going to come into play in greater ways. And I also, I do like, honestly, and it's more Habermas that was influential though, is in thinking about how the internet should be governed.
Right.
Right. sort of discourse principle that seeks to maximize the exchange of discourse should be the guiding principle. I think that's the right way to be going in for something like internet governance. I'd be concerned. So later, Habermas, I just saw, was just interviewed, so he's going to be over 100.
Wow.
And still, being interviewed and productive. So in his later work, that was written after Rawls died around 2000.
That's right.
He began to talk about what he called the post-secular age.
Interesting.
The idea of being, in his earlier thought, was influenced by Weber, and he assumed that as mankind became more, humankind became more powerful and effective in the world, that the need for religion would decline and eventually fade. And in his later work, which was written after 9/11, I think significantly, he began to think that no, religion is a fundamental part of human existence,
Right.
and it's not going away. It's just part of our nature, human nature, to be religious. That doesn't mean everyone's religious,
Right.
but it's part. The impulse is there as part of our nature, and he wants to reform his work and his later work to account for that and accommodate it. So that's lacking in Rawls.
Right.
Because it wasn't on Rawls' agenda as much. And I think as the world gets smaller, that needs, Habermas is right, that needs to be worked out in a way that makes sense. And, that religious impulse is a two-edged sword. It can provide, it can be, we've seen in history where religion has made a positive impact and a negative impact.
That's right.
So it needs to be worked out in a way where this part of us as human beings, right, is given space. I put that with the idea of what we were talking about earlier, where the system is sort of pushing out those distinctive human elements.
That's right.
Right, and again,
That interplay work.
for how does it work and maintain a stable polity?
Right.
Where it's not just one that there's like, what Rawls would call the modus vivendi, where there's a cessation in hostilities. But how do you take a globally pluralistic society that's kind of connected through this communication network? It's still very distinct and different. We don't want everyone to be the same, right?
Right.
How do we maintain that difference and have an emerging global society that isn't just about sort of defending rights and so forth, but where there's a progress towards something?
Exactly.
I think that's really critical. And Rawls is a part of that story. Habermas is a part of that story, and I think there's some work being done today which is continuing that in very interesting ways. So,
Definitely.
yeah, we're getting to be. It's a small planet. I think
It sure is.
getting more aware of that all the time.
I think we sure are.
It's a small solar system, really.
Exactly. It's not that big. That's right.
I love science fiction. It's
Definitely,
a theme, right?
For sure. Cool. And so on the same token, Nozick. So you've got Rawls.
Yeah.
I have to mention Nozick, and then we should come to
I think, see my comments about capitalism
Right,
above.
exactly.
A lot of ways on Nozick. Very important. Overrated, probably, yes. I think, like I say, I don't know that Nozick has much to say about the kinds of problems we were just talking about.
That's right. No, actually, probably none.
Yeah, just
No,
about
Exactly.
or people who come after Nozick would try, I think, to make it more a defense of rights,
Right.
and not about a common good that's being sought.
Exactly.
Right, and in that regard, it becomes, I think, in some ways a less stable system, but also the resulting system is one where our sort of distinctiveness as human beings is more suppressed.
Right.
So, yeah. It's going to be an interesting future.
It sure is. Oh my gosh.
I wonder, if I'm lucky enough to have grandchildren, what would the world be like when they're adults?
Definitely.
All we know is it'll be different.
We sure will. So this next one, we only got two more, but postmodernism. Overrated, underrated. Should it matter, should it not?
I think it's underrated in Anglophone in the Anglophone world, you know, because it deals with it. Actually, you know, there's a philosopher named Hubert Dreyfus, who's a phenomenologist, writing out in Berkeley. He back in the 70s, he wrote this book called "What Computers Can't Do," right? And this was 70s, like where things were in the 70s. It was on the fact that, you know, the early sort of ground zero AI that was developing at that time.
Right.
He argued that, you know, there are things algorithms can't accomplish that humans do easily.
Right.
Right. And which was, you know, at the time sort of universally ignored by people.
Exactly.
And then, you know, later on when they, you know, some thoughts that maybe, yeah, he was onto something. That's a big part of phenomenology and continental thought. It begins even with Heidegger, the idea that there are aspects to our existence that are meaningful that can't be reduced to concepts.
Right.
Right. And because of that, they can't be captured in algorithms. Right. And yet they can be some of the most meaningful things that I've experienced. A good example being religion.
Right.
A lot of religions talk about the core experience being something that's ineffable.
Right.
In around 2000, I think he wrote What Computers Still Can't Do, which is, you know, it's still making the same point that there are things that can't be modeled. But it was still, I think, I wonder if someone doing like neural nets today would agree with what he was, with his argument.
I see.
Now. Because there are things now, right, computationally that don't necessarily, that can kind of capture meaning that isn't concretized in a sort of a variable.
Right.
Right. And so that's kind of an interesting thing. But,
definitely.
In that area, you know, postmodern thought is actually speaking to something that's going on. And if you look at contemporary postmodern thought, people like Gauss Debra or Bruno Latour, who are talking about mathematics and as being sort of the foundation for everything, and you know, his systems theory that Latour talks about. It looks a lot like, you know, some things that are going on here now. I think what that really means is the divide between, you know, Anglophone and continental philosophy is softening,
right?
And it's less a divide now than it has been in the past, and we can see that they can inform each other in new ways. And,
it's still interesting though, because, you know, Luhmann, you know, so important in Germany.
Yes.
Right. You know, I had a political science professor, and he gave me a translated book on systems theory, and I read through it, like, wow. And I talked to academics all the time in America, and you're the first one who's ever known who it is, and I've talked to probably 100 at this point.
Wow.
You know, just mentioning it.
See, and that's, you know, historically, it's always a little bit strange to me that we have Anglophone and continental, when like Frege was one of the founders of the Anglophone.
That's right. It makes no sense.
It makes no sense, right? It's an artificial distinction.
Right.
It's more of a style difference,
right.
I think, and I think we're beginning to see the connections more now. And the interesting thing is, I think the technology and what Floridi calls the philosophy of information actually helps to drive the two back together again. Although I don't know that he would agree with me. He's at Oxford, you know.
Right, exactly.
That's Anglophone. That's the home ground for Anglophone philosophy. But you know, I think a lot of it, and this is really not fair. I mean, they are reaching out to that other side. That's right. So, yeah, it's again, the world's becoming smaller.
Sure is.
Part of the world. It's interesting to think that how that divide between English and continental philosophy is picked up in somewhere like Japan, right? Where they don't start out with a dog in the fight, you know.
Right.
And you can see that's more what it's like, you know, a little blending, a little taking here and there.
Right.
And maybe that's where we end up eventually.
Interesting.
So rather than being sort of intellectual divides, or more cultural divides with biases. And
Right.
We get beyond that. We can start. Well, it's only been, what, 100 years?
That's right.
That's not
Not very long at all. Definitely. Cool. So this final one, hey, this actually gets into terminology a little bit. Will we ever have a real conscious, hard AI? Is that possible? I tend to think it's probably not even possible to build a truly conscious AI. But I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. It's a very difficult question. It has to do with, what is consciousness, right?
Yeah, that's the first question. What is consciousness?
We could spend the next.
Let's start.
1,000
Let's end
years
on an
sitting
easy
here, right?
question.
Like,
What is
exactly.
consciousness? I wouldn't want to preclude it.
Okay.
I don't think we understand what consciousness is well enough to say one way or another. So I'm totally agnostic
Right.
on the question. It's possible that we will someday. But like I say, if that were to occur, it would be so unlike human consciousness, right? That Wittgenstein has this thing about if a lion could speak, it wouldn't have anything that would be of interest to say to us.
Right.
And I think that would be the same sort of thing. I mean, it would be conscious of things that we're not aware of, and it would have reasoning process that would be unrecognizable to us.
Right.
Because, like I say, no one would build a device that is as confused and cobbled together as a human being.
That's right.
Yeah, you think of like your brain is an evolved structure, and it has sort of a crocodile limbic system in
Right.
there, right? And it has the little lemur section, and then the
Exactly.
primate section, and they all fight.
Right.
Right, for dominance, right? This is not the way you engineer something.
That's exactly right. That's not the way I'll put it together.
It's an argument that's going on in your head. It's
Exactly.
not, so it's, if there was something that was a conscious machine,
Wouldn't look anything like it.
what would that even, like, what would it mean? And what would it mean to me if it was so
That's right.
different that it was, on a different level? What will we mean to it is another question.
Exactly.
I'm going with the benevolent AI master that looks at us as pets, like house pets.
There you go.
I think that's where
Treats us nice, feeds us.
Yeah, feeds us.
Exactly.
I'm not too concerned about it, but I don't want to be spayed. That's
exactly right. So we're going to play that one if possible. That's exactly right.
For my own good, right?
Gotcha. That's right. That's right. Awesome. Man. So this last question is for kind of our younger audience. Do you have any advice for a 20-year-old version of yourself? What would you tell the 20-year-old Kevin Lee?
I'd rather tell a 20-year-old somebody else.
Okay.
20-year-old Kevin Lee, quit now. Check out. It's not going to get any better.
Exactly.
But for people who have hope, I think the one thing you can count on, right, is that the world is going to be different. Like I say, I think, like from an educational perspective, nowadays you can't educate for a career that you think you're going to have your whole life, because it may be by the time you are finished being educated for that career, it doesn't exist anymore.
That's right.
So it's more important to build skill sets and understanding. And I think that's where our education system often fails. We're really good at teaching skills, marketable skills, which is to say that education's been taken over by sort of a consumerist capitalist capitalism. To get that kind of, in the old days, and for all, we criticize, and there are good grounds to, but education before 1968, before the Great, revolution, there was a common core
Right.
in the humanities, or those sort of great books.
Right.
And I think that the value of that approach is it teaches people about their own agency, their own power to change things. The fact that the questions that are asked in those great books are questions that are their questions now.
Exactly.
And that they can contribute to that dialogue. I teach a class where I try and encourage students we read a lot of sort of literature. I try to encourage the students to make their own list Like, what are the great books for you?
Interesting.
And I think it's important for young people to do that, to actually think, what are the things that, where do I sort of touch down? What are the sources of value in my life? And to do it consciously, and to realize that there's a system out there, and it can be changed.
Right.
And that it changes with an idea that starts with one person and spreads to another.
Right.
And that's what they can do, right? And I think we can take that and own it.
Definitely.
It's not only that you can change the world, and hopefully you can, but even if you decide not to, you own that decision.
Exactly.
Right? And as a result, you connect to it more. You can be happier in your life because you know why you are getting up to go to work. That's
right.
So I think that'd be the one good piece of advice I could give is to, really think. And nowadays, it's not just great books.
Right.
I think the common literature today is movies.
That's right.
So go out and make that list of your favorite movies and really think about what is the ones you're willing to watch over and over again. Right?
That's right.
And what values are being expressed there that appeal to you.
Right.
And then think about how that fits into the rest of your life.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I hope that that's good advice.
Definitely.
But in the end, right, when the world changes really rapidly and the rate of change is going to probably accelerate,
right,
then it's not like I'm this person who doesn't even know who I am and I'm trying to fit into this world that's out there that's changing. If you can have some sense of integrity of your own personal identity, it's easier to cope with the change.
Exactly.
It's like now it's this person fitting into that
right.
world,
That's right.
rather than just sort of being blown apart.
That's a great point.
So hopefully that works.
No, that was excellent. And I have to ask before I let you go. What are some of those great books for you?
For me? Oh wow.
Because I want to read them. So
and it's
stuff.
For me, they're probably a lot of them are kind of from my education. So I studied with Jean Bethel, who was a great Augustinian scholar.
Right.
And she had a big influence on me. So I have to say, all of her work and Augustine. I'll go back and look at some of those classic Christian texts because they have really interesting ideas.
Right.
I was influenced by Wittgenstein to a great degree, John Paul II, and then I read his early work when he was a philosopher. That was very influential for me. And it led me into reading the continental philosophy. So some Heidegger. I got into reading Maurice Merleau-Ponty, who was relevant to his life. And Ponty is very good, interesting philosopher. And then on the law side, I don't know if there's a particular legal theorist that I kind of like. I read, you have to read the classics, H.L.A. Hart's The Concept of Law. Those things become interesting to me when you put them into that longer story.
I see.
And recently, recently I found I've been drawn to reading. I read Alan Turing's dissertation.
Nice.
I'd read about Whitehead and Russell and the Principia Mathematica, and then Kurt Gödel's work. I'd read about it, and that's what Turing was reading. And I happened to find his dissertation, and I read it, and it is really what a mind.
I'm sure.
Just what a mind. And I think the lost hero in the whole story is Claude Shannon, who just had his 100th birthday this year. And another one is just a stunningly, brilliant person who could obviously see things that no one else could see, and almost lost in history.
That's right.
In mainstream
That's right.
history, which is really sad. So those are some. But I always say you have sort of great books that you always come back to, and then you have good ones, right?
That's right. That's exactly right.
You have the ones that are influential that you don't want to admit.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
the science fiction books, some of them
There you
aren't so
go.
good, but they, and the books you read to your kids again, and you say, like Winnie the Pooh, you realize that later on when you read it again, you say, wow, that's been my whole life. I've been
Exactly.
I've been influenced by
Like,
this
wow.
deeply.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know, but I do. I think it's really necessary in our culture to be intentional about that.
That's right.
Because no one's doing it, right?
That's very true. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
And I think that it's a real advantage, like a competitive advantage.
It sure
too,
is.
which people don't realize, like.
That's right.
The weird thing to me is it's a distinctly American phenomenon.
Really.
Or Western, phenomenon.
Right.
If you go to Japan, Korea, China, they're fascinated by the origins of Western culture, and they're reading those things in high school. So
Wow.
it's really. I remember 8 years ago now when the president of China was on Fareed Zakaria's show.
Right.
And he interviewed him, this sort of historic interview. You guys going on talking about, everyone reads Adam Smith's theory, the Wealth of Nations, but how many people have read the Theory of Moral Sentiments? And this is the leader of the Chinese people.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, I don't think any of our presidential candidates
No, I haven't even touched it. That's right.
So there's a greater curiosity about the roots of American or Western intellectual tradition abroad
Right.
than there is here.
Wow.
And that can't be sustainable.
That's right. That is right.
So, I don't know where we go.
Exactly.
So, anyway, anything else?
That's it. Well, on that note, I want to thank you so much for
Oh.
your time. This was excellent.
Great.
Now I want to go take a class with you. I don't know how to do it. I might go enroll in law school. Just
There you
to
go.
know that.
There you go.
Yeah.
Come to Campbell. We'll hang out. No, I really appreciate the invitation. It's great to come down and talk and make me think about some things I don't think
Sure,
about
me
every day.
too.
So, great.
Awesome.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.